What's up? I'm going to break down 3 different shell scripts for you line by line in an attempt to show you my approach for writing shell scripts, because I think approach when it comes to shell scripting is pretty important, sort of the big picture of what you want your script to do in a logical sense. And I also think I haven't done a video in a while just kind of breaking things down line by line, which I'm sure is much more helpful than glossing over it. So I figured I would just go ahead and do that. I've got some scripts to show you here that I don't think I've ever talked about before. To start with, I have my guitar recording script. So I have a guitar, it is plugged into a speaker that is also plugged into my computer here. And what I can do is I can enable the script, I can run the script, and when I run the script, it will start recording all output from my guitar. And when I run the script again, it will cease recording that output. And that is essentially the whole logic of the script, right? What I want to happen with this script is when I run it for the first time, it will go ahead and record, and then when I run the script again, it will cease any active recording. So that means the core logical point is we need to check if a recording is already in process. And the way to do that is every time I start recording, I just send the PID of the script to this temporary file, and this $! This is saying send the PID, this represents the PID, so the process ID. Send this to this temporary file, and then later on, if the recording process ID exists, then we're just going to end the recording. So we're going to use the -f test here to see does this file actually exist. If it does, then we're going to end the recording and go ahead and exit the script. And in this end function here to end the recording, I'm going to be removing that process ID file, so that way it is removed. And otherwise, if it is still there, if it's still in existence, then we are going to start recording. So when I run the script for the first time, what it's going to do, it's going to do that check. It's going to go up to the record function here. Something I actually have to do considering that I'm essentially plugging my guitar into a speaker that's also plugged into my computer. How this works is I have to load in a pulse audio module. So I'm gonna do the commands to do that. I did want to point out the PACTL here, Pulse Audio Control. You can list out the module names, so you can get the quick short names, I guess is what it's called, for your modules, your sources, your sinks, etc. I actually just have them done by number here since that's a little bit easier, but I'm just going to go ahead and load the loopback module, since in my case, given the gear that I'm using, that's the module I need. I have a little bit of latency on it. I think this is on the low end for latency, so a little bit of latency, and that module is now loaded, meaning I can record to that module. And then I just use an FFmpeg command here to record with pulse, so the audio device pulse, pulse audio, and then the third input there, and you can see the source 3 third there. So we're just going to record to this particular file path using the date command to ensure I get unique file names every time. A .wav file, I have the and on the end, so it actually records even when I run the script via a hotkey instead of just from the terminal. We're doing what I said with echoing the PID to the temporary file there. I'm also gonna just add something to my status bar to say that it's recording, so similar to my video recording icon, I just have a guitar recording icon there. It's gonna update my DWM block status bar with that icon, and then it is just gonna send me a notification that it has started recording. And so that is basically just, it's going to keep recording until I call this script again. When I call it again, it's going to do that whole check. Does that PID file exist? If it does exist, then we're going to go to the end function here. We're going to complete that end function, and then we're going to go ahead and exit the script. The end function is just going to go ahead and kill FFmpeg, so it's going to stop the recording. It's going to remove that temporary PID file. It's going to unload the pulse audio module there. It's going to undo the icon, so it's going to remove the icon from my status bar, and it's just going to send me a notification saying that the guitar recording ended. So overall, a pretty simple script, but the hinge of this script, the key logical thing, is that I just want to call it once and then again, and the first time I call it, it will start recording. The second time I call it, it will stop recording. Script number 2 is an interactive move and rename. And you might be wondering, okay, Brett, what reason do you have for having an interactive move script, considering the MV command already has a -I flag on it, so why would I need something like this? Well, the reason why I have this is for all of my image-based menus that have multiple files that I may want to select and rename together with a prompt. So for example, this is my image clipboard history, which I'm actually going to go over later in this video. But say I want to rename all of these files, I can just select them, call my shortcut key, and type in the new name that I want to give them. So I can just, type some random characters. That is now my file name with a 1, 2, and 3 on each of these files. So essentially the point of this interactive move is prompting me for a name and then adding on 1, 2, and 3 to each of those files so that it renames everything I've selected. And it is specifically for use in these image-based menus, but this could just be used in general if you wanted to. So the way that this works is it's going to start just by asking the user for the rename, the new file name that we want. So we're going to use the read command here to read input from the user, and we're just going to write that into name as a variable. We also want to initialize the file counter at 1, so that way I can have, file 1, file 2, file 3, etc. We just want to start with 1. So we're going to initialize I equals 1. And the next thing we're going to do is loop through all of our various files given. So for f in $@, what $@ is just going to represent all arguments. So all arguments given to the script, say I give it, 5 different files. And that's what's happening when I tab through and select these files. I'm just, adding scripts or adding files in as argument names to the script. So for all those argument names, all those files, we're going to loop through and execute everything that we need in order to get the file name and then rename it. So to start with, we want to isolate all of the various pieces we need in order to set up the new file name. So we're going to need the directory, we're going to need the current file name, and then we're going to also need the extension if there is one. And you'll notice for both the directory and the extension, I actually have checks to make sure these actually exist. And I added these in after encountering errors when I was moving around files in my home directory. And also I happened to find some files that didn't have an extension and I was running into issues, so that is why I added in these checks. We're essentially just going to check, okay, is there a directory? And the check is essentially the same thing as separating out the directory. So what we want to do is remove everything from the final slash in the file name all the way to the end, right? Because if we have, /home/bread/ test.png, right? Test.png, we want to remove that. We just want to keep the /home/bread, right? For example. So that is what I'm doing with this bash string manipulation here. And of course, there are direct commands to do this instead of doing this all with, shell string manipulation. But this was, I guess, mainly an exercise just to see what I could do in terms of learning the shell string manipulation. But I'm sure it's easier to just use actual commands instead of doing all the, string manipulation stuff. But anyways, essentially what we're saying is remove everything after this slash, so slash and then star. Remove everything after this slash to the end of the string from the f that was passed in from this loop here. The next thing we want to do is just isolate out the file name itself. So we want to remove everything up to and including the final slash. So if we've got, a test.png in /home/bread, we want to remove the /home/bread part and just leave the test.png. And as such, $sign is going to remove up to and including, so star and then slash there. And then next up, we just want to isolate out the extension if it does exist, and we're just going to find that by doing the same thing, but with a dot, so we can get the file extension there. The next thing to do is actually set the new file name. From the file name given with name up here that was read in, we want to just define, alright, new is going to be this new file name. So we're going to start by either putting in the directory, assuming it is non-empty. If it is empty, it's just not going to put anything there. But if it's non-empty, so that's what this colon and then plus is going to check. If it is non-empty, put in the directory with a slash afterwards. So since we had it, remove that slash, we're going to add that back in. Then we're going to put in, alright, the file name itself that was requested up here, the new file name. But if for some reason that was not added, so say I just, prompt to rename and then I press enter without actually entering a name. Actually, I could just show you this. So let me go ahead, rename these again. Let me just press enter and not put in a name. it's just going to name that by the date now, which is intentional, so that way, say I don't have a name for files for some reason, maybe I'm just working through a bunch of files really quickly, I don't know what I want to name them, it'll just name them based on the date, so that's why I have that there. Then we're just going to put in the counter as needed, the I variable from up here, and next we're just going to add in the extension if that does exist. So we'll retain the extension, either if there is an extension or no extension, that will be retained. Then we're just going to actually execute that mv command with the interactive flag, just in case for some reason I have duplicate file names, so it will prompt me before overwriting anything. We're going to rename these to the new file name, and then we're just going to send a notification that they were renamed. And lastly, we just have to add on to the counter to increase as we loop through the files. Script number 3 is my image clipboard history script, which I promised to go over the last time that I talked about it. I promised I would go over it in depth, and I never did, so I'm finally going to go over it in depth. So this script, and I guess the same principle could be applied to other sorts of menus similar to this. So this script actually starts at the bottom, which is the case with a lot of shell scripts, right? You're generally going to have something at the bottom that's going to start off the script and call previous functions that all came before it. So this is just going to start with a case statement referring to the first argument given to the script. We actually have a star here, so if anything that was not specified is given, it's just going to go ahead and print out a help menu. So say I run just image clips by itself, that's our help menu. But if I give it the first argument of cell, for example, that's going to go ahead and open up my selection menu there. So the other arguments that I have are adding an image to the clipboard history, I can download an image from a copied link, and I can also just pull up that selection menu as said, and I can recopy an image. So these are all going to call back to the previously defined functions, and we're also going to pass in all arguments again. So $@ is going to pass in each of the arguments. $1 is first argument. I could say, say I wanted to just pass in like the third argument for some reason, $3. You get the idea. Anyway, so if I go back up here, I just have my directory specified first of all. And the first thing in the add command actually is to double check that that directory does exist. So we're going to -e test to see if the directory exists. If it does not exist, so logical or, if this thing is not true, then we're going to send a notification that it's going to create the directory. It's going to use make directory with the -p flag just to create any needed parent directories, which is generally good practice, just add this in so that way if for some reason I had, another directory in here, like say I add in like that and then /hist, then we'll just have that parent directory created as well as needed. Then we're just going to check, alright, is the thing in my clipboard currently an image? I'm on X11 on this PC at least, so I have Xclip used here for this. Of course, you could swap this out if you're not on X11, but we're just going to check, alright, is this a PNG? If it is a PNG, then great, we can continue and run this to add it into the history. We're just going to pull it out of Xclip, so using the Xclip utility to do this. Xclip is just essentially just a utility for manipulating the Xclipboard, so we're just going to use Xclip to pull that and write it into a file, then send a notification with just the file name and say that was clipped. So say I take a screenshot here, my screenshot is actually bound to also run clip hist add. It will go ahead and add that into my clipboard history there, and you'll see actually because I renamed these files, these are appearing on top. If I go ahead and delete these and re-pull this up, it should just be sorting in most recent order. So yeah, that's the more recent one. Anyways, so next up, I actually have my Qt browser configuration bound with a macro that's going to hint images and allow me to select one and download that into my clipboard history. I have a whole video on Qt browser and how the configuration works. Essentially, it's a keyboard-centric browser, and it has things like link hinting, so I can just press a keybind and then hint images and download any one of those images. I will link that video if you want to figure out how that works, because Qt browser is pretty cool. But anyways, I'm just using wget to download that image into the history directory, and I send a notification. Selection is just literally pulling up a terminal with that FZF menu in it, and this is where I'm going to say I have a video on this menu itself and how the menu itself works for all of the various image menus that I started using, so I will link that video if you want to learn how the menu itself works. But anyways, I'm just have the pull up for the selection menu, and finally I just have recopy, so I can recopy that image to my clipboard. I just double check, okay, is it actually a PNG? And if so, then we're going to copy that into the clipboard as a PNG just using Xclip again, and send a notification that it was recopied.